Hello and welcome to Cal Talks. This is Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader with the University of Florida. Our episode today is a little bit different. We're going to go back in time to talk about a very important topic nowadays, pasture fertilization. This episode was recorded in 2021 and was one of our first Cal Talks episodes, back when Chris Pravat and I were doing the show with invited guest Dr. Cheryl Mackowiak. We discussed many important aspects of how to think about fertilization of cool season forages and also a little bit about warm season perennials. We're getting into the cold season now as we're getting ready to plant winter forages. So take a look at this episode and learn more about the importance of split application and also nitrogen rates, the importance of sulfur and other nutrients in pasture fertilization as they determine productivity. And also, of course, I always take a soil sample to see what the level of macro and micronutrients are in our soil to determine how to better manage and balance that fertilization for your pastures.
Last week, discussing about fertilization, cool season fertilization, and I mentioned the importance of that early shot of nitrogen in those cool season grasses because you need to get them going. That's still early forming. That's when you are going to get most of that growth potential in the first few weeks of growth. And if you don't do that, and even if you fertilize a lot later on, you lost your window. You are lost for an opportunity. You're not going to get much. Then we start discussing about what about a lot of fertilization and just early fertilization in one shot because many producers cannot come back to the pasture is going to be expensive. So what's your take on that initial fertilization in terms of timing and rate on cool season grasses?
Yeah, I guess I preference some of the early fertilization is it in tilled land versus in a pasture. So in tilled land, it's going to be exceedingly important because they have the ability to get up fast. It's a short life cycle. So a lot of the shoot and tiller formation happens early on. And if that nitrogen's not available, then sometimes some of those small grains never catch up. In pasture systems, you're fighting against the existing pasture, and some years are worse than others in terms of dormancy. And if you have Argentine Bahia grass, you get a good frost, it kind of stays dormant. If you've got the Pensacola types or Tipton 9 types, Riata, those kind, they'll keep greening every time it warms up a bit, and then they're competing against the winter forage. So in that case, it's better to wait, put some nitrogen, 30 pounds or so on in the beginning, maybe up to 50, but then just sort of wait and see what's going on. If your summer grass is still going at it, you're probably going to have a bad winter forage regardless. If they've settled down, then you can probably go and add more depending on how it looks. And our eyes are so well calibrated, unless you're blue-green colorblind, you can pretty much tell when something's lacking nitrogen. It's an easy way to tell. And nitrogen's what drives the system in terms of yield. Now, not necessarily in terms of quality, in terms of plant health. All the nutrients are important in that respect, but if you don't have enough nitrogen, nothing else is going to happen as well. You're going to be just lacking in productivity. I'll say a fair number of folks will misdiagnose low sulfur with low nitrogen. In most pasture systems, we don't typically have a low sulfur issue, but those that have followed in row crops especially and don't have a lot of manure in the system, they'll typically have a sulfur deficiency. So adding sulfur with your nitrogen, at least 10 pounds, no more than 10 to 20 pounds per acre of sulfur is really beneficial too. Otherwise, you might think you have a nitrogen deficiency and it's really a sulfur deficiency.
Cheryl, when we get the first shot of fertilizer, normally what I recommend the agents and the farmers to do is that 30 pounds, probably 1 or 2 weeks after planting, because that's when your plants are starting to grow. They're already out, they're already emerged, and they'll be able to use, and then come back with 50-pound fertilization of nitrogen, maybe around 45, 60 days. What about at planting, right at planting, we dump 60 pounds of nitrogen. Do you have a parameter, like an idea for us on how much money in nitrogen we're losing with that one early application?
Well, now Marcelo is part of the winter forages on the dairies, and we've and I just finished sampling there, and I took nitrate ratings, infield nitrate readings, and I put the 50 pounds because I wanted a calibration strip against what the farmer was doing or the dairyman was doing to calibrate some equipment. And in the beginning, I could see some benefit, and later I didn't see it. And so you would say, oh, well, one, it either didn't need it, or two, we lost it because I did put it out. Very soluble ammonium nitrate at planting. And the nitrates told a different story. Those nitrates were there. So with winter forages in a tilled system, and dairies will put out irrigation, unless you get a real big rain, 3-4 inches at a time. I think it's pretty much there, and they might have to get a little bit more root to get it. I don't think we have big losses in that case, Marcelo. And because those plants, they're growing fast too, and so I think you're okay there. I mean, you got to balance the cost of going back out in the field multiple times, and what you can potentially lose. So yeah, if everything's perfect, it'd be great to put 30 pounds out early, come back again and put the other 50 pounds out, do it all on schedule. But, I think there's got to be a little more work on that in terms, especially for extension. It's like, okay, how practical is this? Or how much are we really losing? Potentially you could lose a lot, but maybe more often than not, we don't. We're usually planting around the drier time of our year too. We're not getting a lot of big storms. And by the time that forage comes up, now they can reach that nitrogen anyways.
I like 2 applications. Just my personal preference and experience. I like to do 2 applications. I don't like to just, we have enough to do, I think farmers and ranchers have enough to do. I kind of try to get it focused on 2 applications. And then unless there's just some massive need for, dry matter, long stem fiber, where we got to produce some emergency forage, that would be the only reason I would think about going back out again. Why fertilize now? It feels like I'm already getting it. I feel like I need the fertilizer in the fall, in the early winter, and then when we get to like 3rd week of February, just let it go. It's coming.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to get too. Are you trying to get energy? Are you trying to get quality? Are you trying to, there's different ways there's not one answer. You can do different things for whatever your needs are. So the dairy producers are totally different than a lot of the ranchers are. So
one of the things I wanted you to just briefly discuss again, Cheryl, was just looking at the difference between prepared seed bed and then when we talk about no-tilled into Bermuda grass or Bahia grass pastures, how you would handle the fertility issues. You said, we don't really want to go too strong with that first application in a no-tilled Bahia grass, Bermuda grass pasture. Can you go a little bit further into that for me?
Well, the key, I think, is that the grass is going to compete and pull that nitrogen away from the winter forage, and they'll probably never release it again. So once it's gone, it's gone. And that's the problem. You're really intercropping rather than overseeding in those cases. And down south, it's even worse. So but we've grown beautiful oats down on the dairies down there. I mean, just amazing.
Prepared seed bed.
On a prepared seed bed.
Yeah.
And I'd like to, we when we were touring Marcel the other day, and it's like, more and more, I wish we could get folks and the equine industry too, to do some prepared seed beds. I mean, in the equine, everything's a prepared seed bed because all the grass is basically gone. But when they graze so hard, having some annual forages on prepared land, it only has to be a fraction of what they normally use to get some of that benefit.
Cheryl, could you talk just a little bit about the legume component and how, a lot of times we'll include white clover, red clover, or crimson clover into some of these mixes. Can you talk about how that legume component, like how does the nitrogen fixation, where is the benefit coming?
Okay. Well, for summer perennials, we have a perennial peanut, and Jose Dubé and others are showing great benefits of that. But when it comes to winter annual legumes, again, management's really important. You can have that contribute from like no nitrogen to up to a couple 100 pounds or at least 100 pounds per acre of nitrogen. But it's all in the management. If you don't let that plant grow enough to fix nitrogen, it's not going to do as much good. In the best world, you're managing well, so you're producing enough forage, it looks like you've got legume in the system, then it could be cycling phosphorus and sulfur, calcium up from deeper in the profile that actually eventually, when it turns over in the summer, contribute to the grasses. The nitrogen alone, of course, can contribute. I've got crimson that I let reseed on its own, and my Bahia grass, I have a fence, and I've never let the seed get on the other side really because I mow it too frequently. The side that has the crimson, you see a major gain in yield just for those first probably about 6 weeks or so after summer green up. I don't see any lingering effect in terms of productivity, but for that first part of the early summer, it really shows some benefit there. And so that's good. And of course, the quality itself, the livestock feeding on it, it's a higher quality. So your overall feed is going to be higher quality, higher crude protein, and some other nutrients as well. But the key again, if you have sandier soils, think of legumes as in terms of seed size. The bigger the seed and you drill it in, the more likely you're going to have success. So lupin, Austrian winter pea, and vetch for drier soils or sandier soils are a better bet than, say, crimson, red clover, fall clover, those things. But where we're at, where it's heavier soil, all those work really well. They do have problems in Central Florida, especially in the Suwannee area, trying to get crimson and some of these other smaller seeded clovers to do much. Some years are great, and other years are a bust. And that's the problem. It's like you gain the trust of a producer and got them all convinced, and then you have a bad year, and they're like, they remember the bad year more than the good years, and they give up on it. So it's always a struggle.
Definitely.
The other thing I noticed about the legumes and in many other low input systems is that you need to build up that soil health, that nitrogen in the soil a little bit. So it's very common to fail. At least I do that. Fail on that first year. It's quite frustrating. But then things pick up and progress a little bit, get better, right?
Notice that on my own place where I have places where, when the crimson's there and it's doing great. But I also have all this volunteer vetch and other things. And then the other part where I'll even take some of the old crimson seed and scatter it around, and next year's nothing and nothing. But then I'll see maybe a little hop clover, the little yellow flowers show up. Then I'll see a little vetch. And then once those that I don't plant come in on their own, then it seems like the crimson comes in better than the other. So I think you're right. I haven't ever seen any papers that specifically account for these things, but there's something going on, and you can probably see it on your own too. But exactly what's going on and what is the key that's making it all come together, I don't know. If it's carbon forms or just certain populations have to, mutualistic populations have to be together, or what's going on. It's weird. But it's something. I agree with you, Marcelo.
We visited a farmer down in Baker County a few years ago, and he had just started this organic system. Doesn't want input, and he's using mixtures, and he's frustrated that his mixtures are not doing well. And I said, well, we need to be persistent, because with some of this, you need to build over time, especially when you come from a very depleted soil, very, very low in organic matter, almost zero nitrogen. You need to build over time. Otherwise, it's not immediate. It takes time to get into that organic production there.
And another thing that we kind of ignore, or willful ignorance, is micronutrients. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to them. So it's zinc and copper and molybdenum and boron and things of that sort. Legumes tend to need more of those than the grasses, but they all need them. But I think we need more look at some of the micros and their interactions, what's going on.
Talking about those legumes and those interactions, I want to share the picture that Paulette just sent here real quick, and a few others that we took last week. This following here is also oats and rye and several mixtures that they had on perennial peanut pasture. This top part here is not planted, and this here where it was planted to the cool season forages. See a lot more weeds here. See a little bit of perennial peanut popping up, but much cleaner rows. Here's a good example where clear land in the winter, there was a lot of weeds, and then the oats growing quite well. And it's, of course, they did put some nitrogen fertilizer here, and you already can see some of that perennial peanut growing. So I found a very interesting situation here where we are growing some cool season forages on that perennial peanut to complement the system. And Cheryl mentioned before, when we started, one of the main challenges of overseeding is competition. And here with the perennial peanut, there is much less competition than the Bahia grass.
They go dormant. Well, at least north.
Yeah, we're capitalizing here on the nitrogen. I did the same thing. I planted Alice clover on my area here, and capitalize some of that nitrogen on the ryegrass, and it's pretty interesting, pretty nice combination.
I saw this down south first, and it eventually happened up in the Quincy area. Same types of studies where we have Bahia grass alone or grown with perennial peanut or perennial peanut alone. And in Quincy, when you grew that perennial peanut with the Bahia in the beginning, first 3 years or so, you could hardly see the peanut. I mean, you could see it was in there, but you had to move away all the Argentine Bahia grass. to really know it's there. Down south, we couldn't get the grass to grow, and we couldn't get it to grow with the peanut until we put nitrogen out. It didn't seem to share too well. And then finally in Quincy, after year 5, our Bahia mixed with peanut is mostly peanut now. Like it's overtaken the Bahia grass, and it's sharing a little bit of nitrogen, but it's not sharing enough to make that grass very vigorous at all. And so you think about in terms of energy, what it takes the peanut to fix that nitrogen, it's very expensive. So why would they just be giving it away for free? So there's probably, if you're returning some of that material to the soil, you're probably gaining some. If the animals then, the excreta is getting there, then it's providing the nitrogen that way. But I think more and more people are realizing the direct transfer of nitrogen between the legume and grass is probably not as direct as some have used to think. So you can get different results depending on how you manage it.
It's more that gets into the system through root exudates and recycling of some of the senescent material and gets into the system. Here in this case would be for the next season.
And so let's move into warm season pastures now. So moving from out of cool season, we get into April. We've got April to late September growth of Bahia grass. Can you talk about some different scenarios where you would see producers in terms of where's optimal for fertilization?
Yeah, well, Bill Blue, who was in my department, an agronomist who did a lot of work with Bahia grass 40, 50 years ago even. And one of his papers said, in terms of Bahia grass, it really didn't matter all that much when you put the fertilizer out in terms of seasonal yield. A lot of folks, and the other thing, what dominates the yield is going to be photoperiod. So regardless of how much nitrogen you're putting out, the greatest yield is going to be, think about the longest days, somewhere between the end of June and mid-July is really going to get most of your yield. So a lot of folks say they have too much Bahia grass in the middle of the summer and they want more on either end. So if you're thinking in terms of nitrogen budget, when you start seeing it green up and the cold is mainly over, so up here it's probably in another couple weeks or so, you could probably start adding nitrogen out. You guys down in the Ona area in that, I know people that apply it late February. So some have already probably applied. You're going to get some more yield, but you'll never get the yield you're going to get, say, in July. So think about how you want to use that nitrogen to throttle up or throttle down. Probably no potassium is the number one deficient nutrient in terms of when someone cuts something out, that's what they cut out first. So a lot of times people are adding phosphorus they don't really need to, and it's expensive. So I'd like to see people add more potassium and probably more micronutrients, or at least consider that. So nitrogen timing for Bahia, not all that important. It's more about how you want to manage your forage. If you want hay, put a dose out, regardless of what you do now, put a dose out probably towards the end of May. Again, if the rains aren't there, it's just going to sit and you don't want it to be lost if it's urea. I know down there you can get ammonium nitrate. We can't get that. We're mainly urea. So you want to make sure you have some rains available before you put it out. But if you're maximizing, say, you want to do a hay cutting in your pasture or something, I'd go for that. And then drop it off a little bit, maybe no more than 50 pounds at a time after that, if you need it at all.
Well, we've been promoting a lot of those new cultivars, and one of the advantages that we always say, Bahia grass cultivars, and we always say, spend the extra $100 per bag on Riata or Tifque and get that better material instead of Pensacola, because you're going to get an early growth. In that case, so this early fertilization, now things are starting to green up. They're not growing very well, but they're starting to green up. Is it worth going there this very early April or late March, get some nitrogen to get those better varieties, those Riata or Tifque, get them going and get them early grazing?
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing some of the Bermudas, I'd say you could start now. But hey, you might want to wait just a little bit longer. So Bermuda, some of the higher performing Bermudas, I'd go ahead and put some nitrogen out now or soon. In the Bahia, I'd probably wait towards the end of the month. And maybe if you've got one of the fast growing ones, if you got the Pensacola, you could probably wait until sometime in mid-April or so before you start getting serious about that. But yeah, we'll start seeing those improved Bahias start taking off a little bit. Again, not as fast as middle of summer, but there's still significant difference.
Marcelo, I think Cheryl brought up a point that in terms of the improved Bahia grasses, you actually limit some of your cool season annual forage growth by adopting those those improved forage varieties. So if it's something you might want to interseed in the future, you might be better sticking with the Argentine that doesn't have that extended. You get the majority of growth in that, June, July, August, and then it kind of starts going the other way. So there's potential there for alternatives.
Yeah. And I always think of the best grazing is Argentine and the best hay are the improved varieties. If you got big enough land where you can do a little of both, diversity is always good. So the average cattle person is just going to get what they can get. And then that's what you're dealing with, which could be complicated. And then, a lot of folks will have a mix of Bahia anyways, and they don't even realize it. And they'll start realizing it when some disease takes out one over the other. That's happened like dollar spot. There's plenty of times where we've done fertility studies, and if you put little, not luxuriant amount of nitrogen, but the upper rates of nitrogen, we tend to see more dollar spot, and that takes out the Pensacola types. And then that's a great way to convert to an Argentine field, because the Argentine doesn't come to dollar spot nearly as much as the Pensacola tip to 9 types of Bahia grass.
Okay, so Courtney has a question here. She, as seed producer, mentioned that there's been a steady decrease in Bahia grass seed yield in the area. Has anyone noticed this, and could it be soil related?
There could be a lot of things. First, I'd find out what variety they're talking about, if it's Argentine or the Pensacola types. And then in general, now we've had Bahia grass decline issues or having disease issues, but general seed production, the first thing I'd ask that person, if it's someone themselves growing seed, is how are they doing their potassium management? Because they have to have some really good fertility to get those seeds to fill. And that's one of the prime nutrients that we find helps with seed fill. And the other question, are they getting a lot of blank seeds? Or are they just not forming seed heads, or the timing's off? So there's a lot of questions to go along with that.
Yeah, there is fertility is one issue, variety is another issue, management is another issue. So most of the decline in Bahia grass production related to that I've seen are related to just base fertility. Another thing that is important to ask is, what about the weed management? Because although Bahia grass can tolerate some of the herbicides, it may be knock that production back. And I've seen that with Hexazen on Velpar and in some Bahia grass fields that were infested with Brunswick. They're trying to reduce the Brunswick grass, so they added Velpar, and it knocked that Bahia grass production back quite a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Another thing to think about, if the seed production is declining on specific fields over time, that's kind of standard. As the stand gets older, seed production will fall off. Your greatest seed yields are normally, first 2, 3, 4 years after establishment, and then it kind of falls off and levels out. So if it's all on one farm every seeing, it might have to do with the age of the stands.
I mean, I've got a super old Bahia field that I do nothing with but bush hog it, and it has incredible, for Argentine, I don't know about the Pensacola types, but it's got great seed head yield. I just can't get anyone to collect seed. And I think there's more to it about when you prepare that field to produce the seed in terms of cutting it. The fertilizer timing and the cutting timing, I think, has a lot to do with it. And then the weather overlaps that. But I think maybe people are cutting a little too early to prepare for seed. And for Argentine especially, you could go a little bit later to get that preparation going. Yeah, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, I guess. The whole thing about renovation, and I'm getting more and more convinced that a major soil disturbance would really help Bahia grass systems. But how do you do that without destroying it with weeds coming up behind you? And so maybe some of this vertical tillage or some of those that are in the know of implements and things could come up with some ideas of how to test some of that. But I think that might be a key to really get these pastures reinvigorated, because we know it helps a lot.
I believe in Don Ball's book, Southern Forages, it talks about 3 to 5 years being the highest in terms of forage production, in terms of just Southern forages that on perennial stands, usually but somewhere between 3 and 5 years should be like that optimal output.
I think there's a lot more interactions that we're missing, and it could be cultivar differences too. So I hate when people say Bahia and it's just Bahia, and it's like, well, cultivars make a difference in scientific writings. They don't give the cultivar. I wish they would. Interesting. I think it's an interesting topic. I'd like to see folks get more involved with that. There's a lot to learn, I think.
Okay. So I get another question. I'll pasture aeration. So there's some work I've seen from Vendramini and also from Missouri. Very little results from pasture aeration itself. What happens, Cheryl can correct me, you disturb that soil, you get some of that organic matter, which is low here. You start decomposing some of that and the nitrogen gets mineralized. And that's when you see a burst of growth. But at the end of the day, according to the data that Ramini showed me, it's not as good as fertilizing it, or you don't have the same effect as if you're fertilizing with one more equipment you need now for doing the aeration.
Well, that would be tied in with the other disturbance. And so just like disturbance, there's different ways of aerating too. So it's people are pro or con, and it's like got to be real specific of exactly what methodology they're using.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today, Cheryl. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was fun, guys.
I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments, ideas, or thoughts to share with us, please reach out to us through forages@ifas.ufl.edu or through our social media. Take a look in the description of the podcast to find all the links here. And we hope to see you in the next Cow Talks podcast. Cow Talk podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage team with technical support from the University of Florida College of Agriculture and Life Sciences Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Valau, Olivia Maule, and Ashley Kanabrowski.